Welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast, where we explore the game-changing understanding that can unlock new levels of performance and well-being in the workplace. If you want to be part of the new breed of leaders in business, if you're fed up with the conventional echo chamber, and if you want to be part of a revolution in human potential, then join us to discover the powerful resource that lives before our psychology.
Hello and welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast series. Welcome today, Piers. Thanks so much for joining. Just really happy to have you on. When I started this podcast, only a few weeks ago now, the initial thought was very much around sort of digital transformation. That was where I was going, and I realized very quickly that actually that's not what I wanted to talk about at all. What I actually wanted to talk about is to talk to people who have impacted my world, people who I see out in business. They're just people who I respect, and I just want to get them on because I found that in my life, all I've ever really been successful because is for having just really good relationships with people, learning from people, and speaking to people that are infinitely more clued up on stuff for me. So a little bit of a background into why I wanted you on, and I think really I'm going to hand the mic proverbially to you. But I went on your course now back in I think it's spring, wasn't it? Around sort of springtime. I'm trying to think exactly when.
Yeah, March 25, in case you were listening in 20 years' time.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd always gone through life, and I'd always gone through my sort of world and my sort of career especially, but personal life as well, being a little bit different, a little bit quirky, and a little bit sort of looking at the world with a slightly different lens than I'd found. And when I'd ever opened that conversation up with people always fascinated and asked me to sort of explain, well, why do you do it this way? And how can you do that? And why do you think about it that way? And the answer was, I didn't know. It just sort of was there. I just sort of knew I was a bit more different. I keep saying I'm different than anyone else. It was that. And it wasn't until I went on the course and started talking to you, and you helped me almost put the words, the form, and the understanding behind what that was. And then I also open up hugely. And there's nothing probably that's impacted my life as much as those 3 days that we had, and I think about it a lot. I put it into practice a lot, and it genuinely is that important. So when I was thinking about this, you were literally top of the list. I wanted to tell people, and people who I would talk to, who I wouldn't be able to articulate it to, that maybe we could, in a shorter period of time, put a little bit of a taster out there for what people could get from this, and how I genuinely believe it not only helps personal life and stuff, but also business, and how that can actually massively impact that. So that's a bit of a ramble to me, but I think probably we should, anyone who doesn't know who you are and what you do, let's have a little bit of a history of who's Piers.
Yeah, well, firstly, Matt, thanks for inviting me on. Absolute pleasure to talk to you and come on your sort of new venture, which looks like it's going great guns. So thank you for that. So yeah, just a minute or two on my background. So I've been in this personal professional development change space, I guess, the last 25 years, working both with private individuals, private clients, and organizations, whether they be huge ones, multinational enterprise, and small startups, entrepreneurs, those kind of things. And what's happened over the 25 years for me is my approach to how I enable individuals, teams, organizations to have a shift in their resourcefulness, their flow, and their well-being has changed. So for the first 10 years, 15 years ago now, I was looking at lots of tools and techniques and psychological strategies and hacks to sort out your mindset, if you like. And it'd be a lot of belief change work, values work, coaching work. In organizations, there'd be lots of inquiry systems thinking, trying to get people to see the world differently from within their psychology. And then about 15 years ago, or 10, 15 years ago, it took about 5 years for the change, I started seeing it differently. And that came from having some really quite big realizations about the nature of the mind itself, and even our experience of what reality is, which does fly in the face of mainstream science, although science is catching up. And then there's implications for that, for how we get the best out of the mind, and how we see the role of the mind in creating our everyday reality. And then it goes right from that sort of very profound sounding part into the practicalities of what that means for not only our individual well-being and performance, but also for how organizations work. So it goes from the profound to the practical. And that's the journey I've been on the last 25 years.
Yeah.
I've really spent the last 10 years trying to codify something that can sound quite abstract and esoteric into something accessible to people, that when they come on a 3-day program or have some coaching with me, they can leave and say the lovely thing that you just said, which is it makes a massive difference to my life, probably the biggest thing ever. And I get that feedback, luckily, all the time. I've just finished a program and people were just saying, this is the best thing ever. Why not do it before?
Yeah.
Now, it's taken me 25 years to get there, but I'm trying to condense that into a short period of time that's accessible and relevant for the world, going from the profound to the practical. So that's my kind of overview, Matt. If you want to dive into any part of my life,
let
me know.
I do. And I think so. I've listened to a few of your podcasts as well, and I was listening to one actually last night, just ahead, your most recent one, and you very much touched on there around the fact that you used to maybe skirt around some of these things, and I think you talked about then about hacking the system a little bit to kind of get people to, whereas now you just go straight in and you kind of just open the box up for everyone, and I think that's so rare to actually see, because I've done different courses over the years and stuff, and I'm sure there's some really clever guys that have been probably maybe even thinking in a similar space, but not able to go, I'm going to actually go full in. So when did you go from that sort of almost classic going corporate to the thing to actually what we'll touch on today?
Yeah, so it was an evolution, and there are stages to that, because I think you have to see it for yourself first, and as your own what you might call grounding changes, things just came differently out of my mouth. I remember when I did the shift from NLP to a more spiritual perspective, I was actually running an NLP course, and during that course I just found myself talking about the other direction, and I was like, oh, I just couldn't help myself. So and then I think what stopped me going all in till about 4 or 5 years ago, when I just went, I'm going really direct path now, is what they call direct path, is fear that people might not get it, or it might be considered initially too woo-woo. And as soon as you let go of that kind of fear, it just happens. And the realizations that people have are so powerful that you just see that anyone can have them. And it's not like, oh, well, those people can't because they're this and that. So, and I always say it goes from invisible to subtle to obvious, and it dances around. It can slip back from particularly from obvious to subtle. But because it's invisible to start with, sometimes there's reluctance to go direct. But I just know that what I call the direct path, going straight in for it, bring the rubber to people's feet about the nature of reality, to me feels the most valuable thing that I can point to, because it serves people in the most transformative way. And when you have that freedom, in a way, it's ironic. You almost I don't care whether someone gets it or not. Is this it?
Yeah.
But in doing that, people seem to. When you're tiptoeing around going, well, I can't say that bit because it's too woo-woo, and I can't say that bit, it somehow gets in the way.
Yeah, I think that woo-woo thing's quite funny, because I must be honest, I'm a people pleaser, I think. So when I first came back and I started talking to people, I was like, well, it's a bit out there, it's a bit kind of thing. So bear with me, buckle in.
Yeah.
I would say that 80 to 85% of people who listened and let me just sort of explain what I thought I heard and everything were like, no, I get that. That makes sense to me, that thing. So I think there's always that. And I think we're in a different place probably now, 2025, than maybe you would have. I mean, God, can you imagine trying to do this back in the 80s? You would have been no one would have listened. But as we've sort of, people's minds are a bit more open. People are looking for more, new ways of thinking and things. And I think that's why this maybe fits here today. Where
a couple of things that are contributing to that. One is, and I find a lot of people that come to my course are from this. They've tried the hacks and the 5 a.m. club and the this and the that, and it hasn't really worked. There was some uplift from it, but either it's half-lifed off, or they just find it tiring to be that on it the whole time in terms of managing their mind.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of fatigue of the other approaches. Also, what's helpful, I think, is science is catching up now. So the gap between what we're pointing to and what science is saying is, when I was first looking in this direction about 10, 15 years ago, it was hard to find a scientific backdrop. Now I can find the scientists relatively easy. You were saying, do like Don Hoffman and Bernard etc. Are saying this stuff. So there's more evidence of that conceptual mind to grab onto. And I think as we see the pace of change going to what you talk about in your world, business world, commercial world, going up and up and up and not slowing down, and there's more ambiguity, change on the horizon, people realize you can't manage the mind like we would think we need to, which is about control, and I have a hack for this and a psychological strategy for that. So, and what the quality of mind approach points to is that actually we don't, well, as we can get into this if you want to, but there is no free will to control the mind. So that comfort zone we're trying to get to by controlling the mind doesn't exist, which really is very, very relevant for today's very fast change in the world and 24/7 and AI. So the old ways are just not hacking it anymore. I think people are starting to see that. And there's something beautiful that when people start to see this, they resonate with it. And I mean, I had a guy on the course the other day, on Thursday, just say, oh my word, of course this makes more sense. What was I doing for the last 40 years? And that's the biggest thing that we get is kind of, how did I not see this? Because in a way, this sounds so trite. It's hiding in plain sight. And it's so beautifully simple once realized, not intellectually realized, but seen that, this makes more sense than the other way. It's like a metaphor, the shift from, if you like, going on the water, from rowing to sailing.
Yeah.
You realize sailing is this, why would you ever row again? Because sailing's so much more fun.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
More enjoyable experience, unless you think suffering is how what has to happen, which a lot of us accidentally being conditioned.
Yeah, definitely. I keep going back to my personal experience. So we did the course day one, phoned up my friend John, who's also been on the podcast as well, and said, I've known him for years. And I said, this is what we were talking about. This is what we were talking about 15 years ago. And someone's been able, for the first time, to be able to help me, not articulate it, but just help me grasp those threads that they were deeming at. And then the other thing was, and we talk about coincidence and different things, and I'm sure you'll tell me which way it is, but within those few days and within the weeks and everything post that, my flow, my ease, my ability to get work, not that work was my kind of focus at all, but just I'm a contractor, I'm always out there sort of dipping in and different things. Everything was just easier because the stress and the kind of the worry and the panic and the focus was gone, and that flow became easier. And I've been able, in parrot fashion, well, pigeon fashion, really, to be able to just help people a little bit in that. So I think with all of that said, people are probably going, well, what are you talking about, guys? So I think it's probably a good time to just, well, what are we talking about?
Yeah. So I'm ready for this. Buckle in, everyone.
Yeah,
so,
here we go.
And what I would suggest to people is they listen to this with, again, trite words, a curious open mind. Because if you try and listen to this on times 1.5 and you go, I just want a gist of what Piers is on about, it doesn't gist, this stuff. But having said that, a little bit of it can go a long way. Yeah. So what we're pointing here to is to see that there's a few elements to it, but let's go on a little bit gently. The first thing is, and some people will see this anyway, is to see that how we've been conditioned is often that events, circumstances, situations, the past will make a difference to how we see the world and how we feel and our resourcefulness. And that can be down to very practical things. Because you're having a nice day, the email comes in from the boss or the angry customer or your bank manager, or something happens, your kids do this, and you feel off and you feel, oh no, and it were like, well, it'll be better when that gets fixed. So we put a conditionality on something as if an event or circumstance can determine on level of resourcefulness, enjoyment, and flow in the world. Now, what we're saying is, no, it's completely the other way around. That the mind, depending on the aperture that we're in, and I'll define aperture in a little bit moment, is creating how the world looks and feels to us. So it's not like our mindset or our aperture is dependent on what happens. Actually, what is going on and how the world looks and feels comes from that aperture. Now, you could all spot that, because as that aperture, which is a metaphor, expands and contracts, the world, the same world, let's call it, the same set of events and circumstances can look very different. And that can happen in 1 second. So you get the email, you read it, and you're like, oh my God. You look back a minute later, it's like, oh, that's fine. Or after lunch, or the next morning, or something happens. So we can see that to an extent. Basically, we go, yeah, I can see that on the medium to minor stuff. But a biggie, there's a big thing, like I lost my job, or my relationship ended, or someone in my family got ill, or surely that's not the case. I'm like, no, it is. That aperture is always creating how the world looks and feels. And actually to such an extent that it becomes helpful, because we can then use those sensations of, you might call them stress or pressure or fear or anxiety or loneliness or disconnection or urgency, and sensation, what I call sensation indicators, that tell us that this mind is more contracted. Now, what do we mean by more contracted? Well, we mean that the mind is self-identified. So in those moments when the mind, the aperture is looking more contracted, and therefore the world's looking less enjoyable and resourceful, is because we've accidentally, innocently, invisibly self-identified, which means, in layman's terms, we're having a lot more me thinking. Or what does this mean for me in the future? What does this mean about me? What can little me do about this? Right? Now, contrast that to what we might call flow state, or being in the zone, depending what language you use, where we'd even say, I lost myself in something. So, let's say you love singing or dancing or creating something or cooking or chatting to friends or even writing a report for work, or whatever it is. Your time disappears. We're just in it. We're in the flow. Resourcefulness is coming through. In that, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of me, you in it. So the me gets out of the way in a way. Now, when we're in a contracted aperture, there's lots of kind of referential thinking to me, and it feels all my resourcefulness is just me. Whereas in flow, we feel like we've got this infinite resourcefulness. And it's to do with the core of what we dive into, we said we dive into it, is undoing the case of mistaken identity, which is we think we are this me, which is why we have so much self-identified thinking. When we see through that at a realized level, we get more flow state. So the result of this work is you spend a greater ratio of your time in flow and in the zone, like you described, than being self-identified and contracted. Now, Matt, that was a kind of a 3-4 minute overview of 3 days. No idea what you want to dive into on that, but hopefully it gave you some sense of it, and listeners, maybe we play it again and listen more. But we can dive more in now. But you tell me what you heard in that.
Yeah, no, dude, and that's why I just sort of kept quiet there, so people could just take that clip and just kind of listen there. So I think there's a few bits for me to sort of dig into. One is I want to touch on flow state, what that is, aperture. I've tried to explain that kind of aperture to people, and people get the kind of the concept of it, but maybe sort of touch on those. I think those two, because I think actually for me, for the people listening, for the people who are just sort of touching on these, those two probably are the most useful. The fact that by understanding aperture, we can realize that, like I always say, much like you said, I always say, like, mate, you wake up in a bad mood, that bus is late, you stub your toe, you do all this, and I sort of say those things, and they kind of mean, and people resonate with those. So how do we sort of focus in on aperture? What does that actually mean? And then the other one is that flow. And I think that's exactly what I touched on, was when I'm in that flow state, everything's easy. How do you get more flow and all of these? And I know this is a bigger thing. These are just these little tasty morsels, but I think it's good for people to see, because these are the things that get me excited. You can tell, like, the whole way I'm talking now, these are the things that I always resonate with, those two especially.
Yeah. And actually, aperture and flow are very similar, because really when we're in expanded aperture, that is flow. Right?
Right.
And when we're in contracted aperture, there's lack of flow. So
Got you.
flow, to me, the way I look at flow is when there's a blend of the learned mind, its ability to do something. So let's say you're great at pottery or playing tennis or doing digital transformation. There's a learned mind that has some muscle memory, skills, expertise in that. So we need that in the game of life if we're going to do those activities. So we still have that coming through, but there's not all the self-identification going on. And instead, we've got this emergent, inspired, creative, resilient, and generative intelligence behind the system as well. And that's what flow is. And it can feel so inspired when we get the blend of those two bits of the system, if you like. And that's what flow is. And when we're in an expanded aperture, that comes through. But a lot of us don't spend much time in flow. I mean, I always ask at the beginning of the program, how I describe flow. And I say, well, how much of your week would you say you spend in flow? It's like 5-10%, I'm lucky.
Yeah.
A bit more on Sundays, maybe, depending on how it's, So the key we're talking though is, because a lot of people go, oh, that sounds great. I'd love to have more of that. And they probably spotted that be useful. And then they've gone, well, how do I have more of that? And that's when they've gone what I would call more downstream into psychological hacks or tools or doing some yoga or some mantras or managing the mind. And that's what I did for the first 10 years of my career. I gave people those tools and techniques, and they kind of work, but they are not the transformative shift we're talking about with quality of mind, and they're not as pervasive or sustainable.
They never worked for me, those things. I always try to meditate, or I try to do these things, and I don't know, I couldn't be bothered, and I would lose focus, and I would stress myself out trying to be calm and relax. I would find that more stressful than the actual thing that I was trying to do. And in my head, and the person that I wanted to kind of portray was this calm, and it was more stressful. It was completely stressful, and it was not for me.
It's so funny that the metaphor I use is, it's like trying to get dry in the shower without turning the water off.
Yeah,
because it doesn't work. And I think because I was relatively lazy around things like mindfulness and meditation, I was never very good at it, and that's why I came across what I do now. Because I'm like, don't sit there and do. I mean, actually, now I could do it, ironically, but at the time, a bit like you, I was like, oh. And that's why I sort of found an easier way. So trying to manage the mind to get there doesn't really work. So what we're pointing to instead, if you're like, go, I'm not managing the mind, what am I going to do? Just be a victim to what happens? No. We start to recognize and realize, and those are two important words, because this is not an intellectual shift, is it? We see, and we just look at little kiddies. If you want to see whether this is true or in the human system or not, look at little kids. I mean, your little 18-month, 2-year-olds. Their flow state is phenomenal. They spend their whole life in it, and they have tiny little tantrums, but then they disappear. Right now, what we're pointing to is that flow state, that expanded aperture, is the innate default of the system. It restores back to there, and therefore, the question people have is, well, okay, it restores back to there. Why is it not there more of the time? How do I get it back there more of the time? Well, we have to see through this nature of this case of mistaken identity that I referred to earlier, of this self-me, this Matt or Piers that thinks it can get itself into flow state, first of all, by doing its things. And when that is seen and recognized, and it's not really a tool or technique, because you can't really do it by a thought. It's seeing it before that, which is actually really simple. It's not easy to start, but it's really simple if you see it.
Yeah. There
it is. And you have to sort of pull apart to start with, if I use a metaphor, the weather and the sky. So normally we look out the window and we kind of go, oh, there's some weather. Now all the weather is happening in the sky, right? Or the screen we're looking at, there's a movie on Netflix playing on it, but there's also a screen, but we just see the movie. Right? Now, what we're saying is there's part of the system that is eternal and consistently there before all the mind activity. And what I mean by the mind activity is a thought, a perception, a sensation. Those are all coming and going. So all our thoughts, perceptions, and sensations are coming and going. There's this one, there's that one, and there's something there coming and going in. This is where it gets a little bit like, oh, I don't know what you mean. You don't know what you mean. You're saying coming in. It's just words. But actually, if we notice and just take, 20 seconds to do this, there is little, first of all, spaces we can see in between thoughts, particularly. We go, oh, yeah. And it might be this space that you get to when you are being mindful and meditate, but we're not using a technique to get there. There's also all perceptions, by perception meaning what we see, hear, feel, smell. There's also spaces within those as well. And even when there isn't, there's still something there happening in. And that is the true me before the self. That's what infant babies are. They don't have this self idea. This me thought comes in, 12 months old, we get this me thought, this self-identification. And the reason a baby can lie on the floor and stare at its legs for a month, without being distressed, is because it's in this space, right? Now, when we recognize this space as what we are, we start to see that this space before the activity of the mind is kind of bulletproofed and ring-fenced from the activity of the mind. So it doesn't matter what the thoughts, perceptions, and sensations we're having, however horrible or difficult they are, it's always intact. A bit like the Netflix can't affect the screen and the weather can't affect the sky.
Yeah.
Now, when we start to see this, we can have all this thinking and feelings that the self's trying to get rid of and recognize there's something there before us. And when we touch that space, we go back to that, it resets the mind, and the content of the mind, as real as that is, becomes less true. And in that expanded aperture, we're able to have the realizations to allow the mind to be more fluid, and some of those thoughts and perceptions and feelings become less sticky, right? So you and I both will still have moments where we get in a contracted aperture, but just like a 2-year-old, it doesn't last very long. The system goes really fast. You're like, oh, I was bummed out and now I'm not. It doesn't stick.
Yes.
And it doesn't give you a permanent view of the world, so you become way more resourceful and you become more fertile to insight and realization, which is what helps with change.
And I found that certainly from when I came back. I think when I first came back, the first few weeks and months, I was always trying to force that sort of state. I was trying to sort of create that a little bit. What I've found recently is I can reflect back now, and the way that I'm able to handle conflict, the way that I'm able to handle stress and things, they're still there. It doesn't go away. There's no magic pill that takes it all away. It's shorter and it's less frequent, and I can reflect on it now with almost a sort of a wry smile rather than a grimace. And I don't really know what that means, but I certainly now can look and go, oh, you know what, actually I handled that well. And whether that's personal, whether that's work or whatever it is, my ability to see through that initial reaction, that almost that toddler tantrum like you had, and have less of that. And it's just there, and it's just evident, and it's just noted that has changed in the way that I am. And I can't believe I'm 47 and I'm only knowing it now. Why didn't they teach this at schools?
Quite right. And I think what you're describing there, Matt, is great, because the game of life, as I call it, other people, our wants, our desires, the life we live, it's going on, right? And it's a lovely, vivid, real, animated, visceral experience. It's rich. And it's real, but not true, which is a little hack phrase I use quite a lot, But what happens when we see what we're talking about here is you're still in that, but there's a lot of psychological freedom to it. So because you're not self-identified, it doesn't grip you and pull you down when something in the game of life may chuck you occur to be a curveball, right? And what's beautiful is that we start to see that the way the game of life comes into form, manifests, you could say, in terms particularly of other people and our wants, is a lovely reflection of our conditioned mind. So we've all got this conditioned mind that's just part of the system, and it's showing you where that self-identification is still hiding out. So I've done podcasts on this, but the good one to play with is when you get annoyed by someone else, when someone else really bugs you and frustrates you, there's an emotional charge to it. That's kind of you. Yeah. And I'm not condoning what other people do in the world. That's like a different moral question, but it's showing you where your self-conditioned mind is still resisting the isness of that. Because at the level of the profundity level, there is no separate other, because we're all a mental field, right? So whatever I'm seeing in you is a thought creation of Matt.
Yeah.
And depending on my aperture, Matt's going to appear different. And we can see this in our kids, in our other halves, or our bosses, or our colleagues, or our clients. So we start to see, when I'm getting bummed out, not only does it not bother me like it used to, there's more grace with it rather than grind, but also I'm like, what am I seeing about the nature of how my mind's being conditioned, which is, it's not something done on purpose.
Yeah.
The programming happens, that I can now see through. And then when I see through it, as you're saying, not being stuck in it, but seeing through it, usually some kind of ease or new reality forms around it. And the thing that was really bothering you becomes like a bit of a gift.
Well, yeah. So I think at that point, that gift is very much it. I think I had moments, and I definitely have moments in time where we talk about flow, we talk about all these different things where there was naturally ease. Talking to you and being able to fall into that space easier and stuff is a gift, right? It's a gift now. I have this thing now where my life is better because now I'm able to be in that space more. And I think a lot of people enjoy that space and never realize quite what they've had. When you open it up, so I guess then my question, because we're trying to assimilate everything down into a micro quick chat, and I want to make sure that people who are listening get the, how would one, so let's say I'm Matt, 47, in the space, I'm a bit stressed out and everything. Is there a way that someone can almost take a slice, a quick look at something to go, okay, what is, a little nip, a little bite.
And I've got bags of resources I can share on this, but let me give just people a little group that gets whet the appetite on there. So what we can do is, when we're feeling it bummed out, is a good way to practice this, is just to notice that in that moment there's a bunch of feelings or sensations coming, and there's probably a bit of a story about where they came from and why they came from there, and this is the either we blame ourselves, I'm this kind of person, or we blame the world for being like that. So we've got these sensations turning up, and we've got this narrative. And normally what we do is we kind of legitimize the narrative, like, that's the case, and we slightly try and avoid the feeling, right? And either we avoid the feeling by going onto one of our lovely devices, or by having food, or by going for a run, or by doing some yoga, or we conceptualize it and we give it a name, like, I feel angry or whatever. And what I'm going to suggest is that instead, we actually recognize that all that's going on in that moment is a bunch of sensation. If we don't have the labeling in the narrative, it's just feeling, right? Just like if you go in the shower and turn it to cold, there's a noisy mind going, oh my God, what are you doing? And there's a bunch of sensations. Now, if you don't buy into the sensation, the narrative, it's just sensations. And you can actually find that the human system is really good at feeling. It's what it does. And 2-year-olds are wonderful feelings. They will feel everything. And as they don't resist it to the self, it passes. Because when it's dynamic and fluid, like consciousness, the sensations come in, they'll be felt, they'll be alive, they'll be visceral. And that's what we are, in aliveness, really. Right? Not buying into the narrative. We're actually allowing the sensation. And then you can see it kind of passes. Now, what then usually happens is that the narrative mind, the self mind, the avatar, Matt or Piers, gives a story about that sensation. Oh, Bill, this is coming from this. I've got to fix this. But actually, so the first thing, one thing we can do is just allow any sensation into the system, ignoring the narrative, allow the system to feel, and then you realize, that's actually okay. Having a sensation is what I am, right? Because the sensation isn't happening to you. You're just in awareness of it. Now, they are just language differences, but it's quite easy to spot that in 20, 30 seconds. And what you'll find is by doing that, it becomes more dynamic and it moves. Now, watch out, because the mind will make up lots of stories about it. But that's the trick of the mind. I mean, I always describe the mind, and this is something else, second thing you can spot, is the mind is a beautifully creative, unreliable narrator. So the conceptual learned mind is designed to come up with stories about reality after the fact. Now, that's because evolutionary, there's a procreational benefit in it, watching out for fears and threats. Most of what our minds do nowadays is this unreliable narrator role, but we believe it because it looks very genuine. So start to spot that unreliable narrator. I give one example of that, which is my favorite example. Let's say someone really, really wants to have something. Let's take food, for example. They really want that donut or that biscuit or that cookie or that second glass of wine or that first glass of wine or whatever it is. And it's like there's an urge in the system. The mind goes, oh, wouldn't that be lovely? We can see it in our mind, right? Oh, salivate at the idea. And then bite into the donut or something. And 20 seconds later, or even 10 seconds later, the mind's going, what did you do that for? You didn't need all that. It's the same mind, right? It was telling us to do one thing and then changing its mind, going, So we can start to see that this mind is an unreliable narrator. So the two little tips I would say is notice what happens when we don't self-identify with feelings and just allow them, they tend to pass. And notice how often that mind is giving us an unreliable narration, and it will come with an icky feeling. That's the aperture. So, and then we can see, the aperture is creating my reality right now. The sensation is giving me that clue. I don't need to buy into what the mind's producing, because we can see it's just the mind. When the aperture expands, things will look different. So, two little, hopefully practical, maybe things to play with the noticing.
And I think to give people kind of a little bit of a linchpin there as well, is that there's a big thing at the moment, is it Wim Hof or whatever? He loves a cold shower, doesn't he? He loves it cold and all that. And I think, I haven't really looked into it, so I might be completely wrong here, but I'll think this is it, is because I've spoken to other people, you jump in that cold shower and you don't feel the cold shower, you just are in the cold shower. And a lot of people are doing that. A lot of people have subscribed to that. It's a really easy step that people have gone. People have actually taken a choice to say, I'm not going to feel the sensation of the hot or the cold. I'm just going to be in that moment. And they've made TV shows and everything. So the jump from going from that, you've already made that decision that it's not hot, it's not cold, it just is. So then this is just that same sensation, that same thought, that same thing. It's just slightly off a curve. It's not in the media. It's not a standard. I haven't made a TV show about it yet. So
no, that's true. And what I would add, just one thing to that shower thing. Right? So if you try and use your willpower to be okay in the cold shower, that's very different to what we're talking about. Because some people, when you first talk about it, they go, right, so I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to go, right, I'm doing 30 seconds, I'm doing 30 seconds, come on. It's okay.
Totally, yes.
This is what we're saying is very different. We're not trying to use the mind to convince the mind it's okay to be in the cold shower, which is using more thought to combat thought. We're saying, go back, well, what in quantum mind terms we call back, you'll be familiar with that phrase, is to see that actually there is no self-mind that needs to be okay with the cold shower, because when you're in just the awareness of, it's just sensation. And that is so much easier than trying to use the mind to convince the mind the cold is okay and waiting for the cold 30 seconds for the minute to be up. Because when you dissolve back into the essence of the sensation and be it, rather than try and manage it or control it, that's when the ease comes. So there's a distinction people there. And it might sound odd at the moment, but if you play that distinction, it's certainly there. And that's what we're talking about here. And then, as you say, Matt, whether it's the cold shower, whether it's a difficult economic situation, whether it's organizational change, whether it's annoying kids or whatever it is, the same thing. It's the same thing.
Yes, and that's what I'm able to sort of see and identify now. I can be in a situation that is out of my control and would somewhat be, stressful situation, and I have this almost looking down on it situation, like it's happening here, and I can witness that situation rather than be there actually as part of it, and that for me just makes things so much easier. You have that initial spike. I think it's very difficult to get away from that initial I'm angry, you've annoyed me, you whatever it is, but very quickly it's just a thing. It's just a
and
sensation.
that initial spike even becomes, well, that's just, I mean, it's not about having this static the sensation the whole time, and the richness to life is having peaks and flows and all those kind of things. And that's what being alive is. I mean, put it this way, we will pay money to be scared. Right? The theater or the cinema or the roller coaster, or so we love feeling, not something to shy away. Kids will run up and jump up a tree and then fall off. So it's not like we need to avoid the initial spike.
No,
it's just not making that initial spike into me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Agreed. And I think, again, talk to people, you in this Zen state now, sort of mocking and having a little bit of a laugh and stuff. And I was like, no, absolutely. It's not that. It's just everything is more heightened in a way that you can see this game and this TV show sort of playing out. And once I sort of see this happening, everything then just becomes so much more easy and flow. And like we say, we would talk about like, well, I've got this happening here and this is going here, and it's all sort of in this nice little mixing pot, rather than being in it, it's over seeing it all. It becomes so much more fun. It becomes so much more of a game. It certainly does for me. I can wake up now with a load of tasks, and this is fun. This is a lovely place to be. It's a really nice thing to have things going on, because I see them and control them and feel them completely different than I would do before. Like say before I was focused, this is the worst thing, my life's so awful, to now it's just, okay, well, there's those things, they matter or they don't matter, and that's certainly how I feel.
You're also, and you mentioned this earlier, that then what turns up in the game of life just becomes so much more emergent, almost effortless, and there's lots more, I don't know if you notice this, more kind of synchronicities and serendipities where things just that happened, oh yeah, they've got to kind of join. And that's so different to trying to do change from the outside in, which a lot of individuals or organizations do. They go, well, we need to get people through the change curve, and but actually when you're in this flow, that change self-perpetuates, right?
Yes.
And change becomes like, there's an obviousness to it, going, well, we should change the way we work, because that would make, so there's a flow to the change, rather than what organizations do, which they go, right, we need to get from A to B. We need to do some employee comms and help people, persuade people why it's a good idea. We need to manage people who are fearful, blah, blah, blah. So it changes the whole paradigm, use that word, on how transformation, personal or organizational, happens once you've got this very fertile soil of the mind just being ready for it, and the emergence coming through, and it's more joyful, and it's richer, and it's alive. It's wake up with some, it's inspiration rather than kind of grind. And it might sound to people a bit too good to be true. What life can be this easy, but as you said, you're 46, 47 years in, and you're like, oh yeah, I wish I'd known this before.
Definitely. And people had always said to me, Matt, you've got like a bit of a natural ease, you always seem sort of thing. But that was a lot of that was acting, sort of keeping up appearances in a way, because that was kind of my persona. it was there. It was obviously, I've always been a bit more relaxed and a bit more sort of not taking the world too seriously, but there was definitely a lot of hiding behind all of that. Whereas now, this and everything that I've learned here in a short term, it just opened it up. So now it's not acting. Now it's not fake. Now it's not me telling people, showing people a different thing. I actually get to be Matt, which is, you know, terrifying for some people, I'm sure. But I get to be the full me. So I guess that we've talked so much about so many things, and there's probably people just sort of like, what's going on there? What would you say to, because the reason I wanted you here to sort of try and put those words that I can't articulate out to other people is, there'll be people listening, there'll be people that I know, and there'll be people that, you know, don't know me or in this space, probably more in tech, I'm guessing, around this, based on just the other people that I've spoken to and stuff, who are in the grind. They're kind of there. They're in that sort of place where they're probably in their sort of mid-40s, thinking, oh, yeah, what is this? Is this it? You know, how many times have you heard people say, is this it? Is this thing? What would you say to that person today to almost give them, you know, they might not even have a thought about it, but what would you say to them today to almost give them that initial, where would they go? What would they do?
Well, what I would say, first of all, if life does feel hard and grind, right, which is very normalized nowadays, that's a sign, right? That is a sign to say, hey, there's a different way to see all this. So that's the first thing. Whether you're in severe burnout or early stages or life just feels like grind, that's a sign. And the sign is that you need to look in a different direction. Yeah. Rather than double down on working harder at the grind and getting better at dealing with grind, pause and go, hang on a minute, life doesn't have to feel like this. So rather than dig down into your psychology more and try and fix it, we go back up the other way. And we start to notice some things about the mind, which things we've just sort of touched on in this podcast, but I've got other resources that will help you if you're curious, because the thing people need now, once they've spotted it, is a curiosity to look in a different place. Now, the learned mind will tell you that's pointless and there's no need and it's a waste of time and I'm too busy to do that. And it looks a bit, I didn't really get what they were on about in that podcast. If it was easy, I would have got it by now, kind of thing. But I'm saying all of those are indicators to get curious in a different way and to get curious about not how do I fix the mind, but the nature of it. Now that's more, it's not as complicated as it sounds. And I've got some little resources, like little 5-minute episodes. You can just listen to some of those on a free audio. And because once you start to see this just a little bit, the door opens, you do start to resonate and you can go, yeah, there it is. But for most of us, the mind is so blimmin' busy, it won't give itself permission to look in a different direction. And I think the phrase I sometimes use is we lack an intellectual humility, right?
Okay.
To press pause on what we know and to think we might have got it wrong for quite a few decades and to not waste time doing something that doesn't make sense to start with. As I say, if it sounds invisible now, like what are they on about? But there's something in you that recognizes the way you're doing it right now probably could do the overhaul.
Yeah.
Then go with that inkling, go with that little whisper in your mind, go with that resonance. Because if you go there and look in the direction we're pointing to, you'll start to see more. And all of these things then that Matt's talked about and my other clients talked about and I talked about, you'll start, maybe that could be there. So to start with, it's pressing pause on how we think the world works and giving ourselves permission to look in a different direction. If we do that, we'll start to see it more. And then it starts to emerge. So what might look like nothing can soon start to emerge into something like a new way. But there is that initial hump to get over because that conditioning told us to look downstream and go upstream.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a really difficult one to sometimes identify. And so certainly the conversations I've had with people when they've been in a bit of a rut or that thing, and then I've tried to sort of explain that it makes sense to them and stuff. I guess it's hard maybe sometimes to self-identify. So you said you've got some resources and some bits and stuff. I think if you can point me to those ones, we can put them in the show notes. I can share them across the things because I really want people I don't want to sound like I'm sort of banging a drum. I really want people to see some of this understanding, because my life, the way that I work, is better because of it. And I know it can impact so many people's way that they think, improve their day to day. Wouldn't you want to improve your day to day? Well, this is the reason why I whistle on about this to anyone that I can, because I want everything to be better. I want people to be happy. I want people to have more joy in their life. And for me, this has been one of those ways that I found that helps.
And that's great, Matt. And 95% of people that come at my door for clients are through recommendation referral, because this is a hard thing to discuss and to get a gist of, as we've just demonstrated in the last hour. But it's like someone saying, you've got to try that new restaurant. Whether if a friend or a good mate, and you said, look, it's changed how I see food, not just the next meal. You're like, oh, I've got to check that out. So I've got some resources. There's a little quizzes you can check, see where your quality mind at. There's some slightly deeper stuff. There's lots of different doors into this. I would just give it a go. And even if you give it 5 minutes and it doesn't quite hit the mark, give it another 5 minutes. It doesn't take long for some of this to grip, but it needs to get past that initial intellectual scrutiny, because this is beyond the intellect. It took me years to do that, but I've got it down 5 minutes for other people now. So
just so easy now.
Reach out if you're curious. Please reach out. I'm always up having a conversation with someone who's genuinely curious to help them in the direction, because as you say, Matt, if more people in the world knew this, it would just make everything.
Oh my goodness! In the world where we are right now, with everything that's going on, we need a bit more of this. I had loads of notes about everything that we were going to talk about today and different things. We talked about hardly any of it, but actually what I think we covered there was exactly what I wanted to get. It was very much around me not being able to, me seeing the world in a different way, not being able to articulate it, and get the person who can articulate that here. A few tidbits. I think probably people listening today still will be a bit like, well, what? There's so much out there.
Well, here's an invitation. If Matt, you get lots of people, or even some people, saying, kicking the tires of this and asking questions. And, well, what did he mean when he said that? Or what did you mean when he said that? I'm very happy to come back and do a listeners' questions part 2, because people are bound to have questions about this, and I love answering them. So if people want to share with you questions going, well, I want to know more about that bit, I'm very happy if you want to come and do a bit more on it.
I think that would be really useful, because this one, more than any of the others, not to discredit any of the others, but this one particularly, everyone's been, I can't wait to listen to that one. That's the one that people, so I know 100% that people are going to go, well, what about? So I think we definitely do that. Let this one go out. Let this one go out. What I'll do as well is specifically with this, there's a few bits that I've noted along the way where I would cut them down into smaller chunks that are useful for people to, like you say, they can listen to this 5-10 minute piece, and that's probably where people, a lot of it's either just talking and me butting in and ruining the flow. But I think so. Okay, great. I could talk to you for hours and years and days, and like I say, I was super excited about you coming on, and you've made the end to this sort of podcast series just fantastic, and I just thanks so much, A, for what you did for me initially, and B, what you continue to do for other people. It's a joy.
I want to echo back, because I love what we're trying to do by helping people to see this, and I can see the love you're coming from in that. So anything I can do, even nudge that along 1%, if it's valuable for people, I'd love to help you with their curiosity on this. And there's bound to be questions, and that's okay. So let's open the space up for people to do that. And I'm happy to come back and do whatever I can to help in the cause of what you're doing. And I think it's wonderful. So thank you for allowing me to be part of it. And anyone listening, just curiosity to look in this direction. And even if they don't know what that means, we can help with that bit. So anything we mean by this direction, it means noticing what the mind's up to before we think we know what it's up to, and what we are innately before all the activity of thinking, perceiving, and feeling comes in. So I'd love to explore this more with people who are genuinely interested. So thank you for the opportunity.
Definitely. Well, I'm going to take you up on that. We're going to come back with with a load of questions. I might stick a few of my own in there as well,
Brilliant.
in there from someone else. Yeah, great. Thank you again. Thank you so much for your time today, and yeah, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, and you, Matt. Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have fun being curious, and catch you next time.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and want to know more, check out our website at qualityofmind.biz. And also, feel free to reach out and leave us a review or a comment. Until next time, have fun being curious.